I'm a psychologist, and today I'm going to talk about how to know if you're a failure. So, the first thing to note about this topic is that there is no universal, standardized, global definition that constitutes a failure as a human being. You think by now there would be one, but there isn't. And the reason for that is because there is no such thing as a human that is a failure. Unfortunately, what can happen is a person might apply their own failure criteria to themselves very harshly, and that can result in them perceiving themselves as a failure, even though they're likely not a failure, and they're likely applying criteria too strictly to themselves that actually doesn't really exist in the first place. But by nature of, I guess you could say, negative or misconstrued thinking, the person who thinks they're a failure might very well conclude that and then roll with that as if there's no other alternative ways to perceive the situation. So let's explore this for a little bit. In various domains in life, there are standardized definitions. Let's take the English language, for example. The word red is a color, right? So it's a standardized definition that most people would probably agree with. Or you might define water as something that you need to drink to ensure your survival. Or you could even go a bit more technical and go something on the lines of H2O or something like that, right? So these are universal agreed upon definitions. But a failure, that's just something that a person probably applies to themselves, or they got someone else told them that and they just apply the label without really dissecting it or thinking any more about it, right? So let's take an example. You get a bad school grade back. Does that make you a failure? You get an exam score back. You don't get that job that you were applying for. You applied for 100 jobs and you didn't get any of them. Does that make you a failure? You probably might be saying yes, that does. And I would ask you, well, does it make you a failure, or does it make it that one specific domain in your life you didn't succeed in at that particular time? So think about that. Why apply a global, all-encompassing label to yourself over one specific instance in one specific time period or context in your life? It doesn't really work, does it? You might rationalize that you're a failure because you're falling behind in life compared to others. And I would ask, well, when were you supposed to arrive? Just because other people arrived there doesn't mean that you should arrive at the location at the same time. When should you have arrived? You'll find that there really is no answer to that question either. You arrive at the destination, the literal moment that you arrive. You might look back in time and think that things that you thought you would do well in, you didn't. Or things that fell apart didn't pan out as planned. And then you might rationalize, well, it's all falling apart, I'm a failure. Which is unusual because that means that there was a point in time when you succeeded. So you were a success. And now you're a failure, so it's changed. How can you be a failure if you've formally succeeded? It doesn't really work at the same time, does it? You can't be both a failure and a success at the same time. So something must be true. Or maybe it's that seeing the world in that binary category isn't really the best way to see it, but think about that. The tricky part with all of this, and how to know if you're a failure, is that there really is no answer to the question because the question can't be answered. Because there's no such thing as a human failure. There's no such thing as you were born to be nothing. What there is an answer for is, did you do well enough or well in the specific context or domain that you are generalizing to your whole self? You can't answer that question. So you can't really know if you're a failure. All you can really know is, did you achieve the thing that you wanted at that specific time period? Yes, no. If the answer is yes, you got what you wanted. If the answer is no, well, that's just delayed gratification, then, isn't it? And you have to try again. The tendency to assign a global self-deprecating label to the self over a few instances of what you perceive as failure is the core of the problem. So you can never really know you're a failure because you literally can't know, because there is no answer. The answer is whatever you make it up to be. What you should look for, really, is what makes you happy. The things that you do that fall in line with your values, independent of external pressures, external stimuli, and external guilt or sense of this is the right way to live and no other alternate way is to live. This video is unscripted, so hopefully it's kind of resonating with what I'm saying. I don't try not to script stuff much anymore. It's better to just give like a hot take. That's basically all I got. There is no criteria. There really isn't. It's about looking at that specific domain in your life right now and assigning value to it as for literally what it is and nothing else. There is no global failure, and by extension, there's no global success. It is the meaning that you derive from the context in and of itself that you then apply to your future life as you move forward. That's the answer to the question.